The moment ex-President Barack Obama walked onto the stage at a big discussion event in the Capitol, the crowd was expecting a deep dive into things like economic recovery, social progress, or environmental goals. What they didn't see coming, though, was a personal jab. The audience went quiet as Obama chuckled softly, glanced at his notes, and quipped, "In the past, we had public servants committed to the cause. Now we have contestants from reality shows tied to some mysterious force." The laughter that followed was light, but the undercurrent was sharp. Karoline Leavitt, sitting a few rows back with her husband, stiffened. It wasn't subtle. That comment was aimed squarely at her, and everyone there knew it. Her fingers tightened around her seat's armrests, though her expression remained impassive. Inside, she was fuming. The crowd seemed ready to brush off the slight, chalking it up to typical political banter. But Karoline wasn't having it. Behind the scenes, her team caught her whispering, "Get me up on that stage right now." In an unscripted move, she walked straight into the spotlight. No notes, no prompts, just raw emotion fueled by conviction. She started calmly, her voice tempered and steady. When someone who claims to embody hope turns to mocking someone else's marriage, maybe it's time to ask what real hope looks like. The crowd gasped. Some leaned in closer, while others looked around, unsure if this was really happening. Then she hit back harder. "Mr. Obama, my husband isn't just some unknown entity. He's a veteran, a teacher, a dad, exactly the kind of person your administration overlooked." Gasps of shock echoed through the room. Her words weren't loud, but they hit deep. Did Obama cross a line by mocking her personal life, or was it just a clever political tactic? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This wasn't just about rules. It was about dignity. And in that moment, Karoline flipped the script live, uncensored, fearless. As the tension in the room mounted, she stood tall under the bright lights. No script, just her genuine belief. For a moment, even Obama looked a bit taken aback. His smile faded into a gaze directed downwards. "You made fun of my marriage," she shot back. "So let's talk about yours in terms of honesty." The crowd recoiled. This wasn't just some political sparring. This was a full-on challenge. She paced the stage like a lawyer building a case. "You preached unity, but spent 8 years deepening divisions. You promised to protect working families, but left them tangled in red tape. You inspired many only to leave them behind for talk shows and streaming deals." Cameras flashed. Journalists rushed to write headlines. Social media buzzed with excitement. Karoline wasn't done. "The same person who told us, 'We are the change we seek,' just reduced my husband, a battle-hardened veteran who served this country honorably, to a punchline. Is that what you mean by change?" Silence blanketed the room. Nobody moved. Then, with perfect timing, she landed the point. "We've put up with enough of the elite arrogance posing as wisdom. We've put up with enough of people who smile in our faces while undermining the very foundation of our country and our families from behind. Can a public figure defend their family without being called overly sentimental? Or is that exactly what leadership should look like?" Share your thoughts below. Karoline scanned the room. No notes, no hesitation, just pure passion, truth, and a fierce sense of accountability. Obama tried to regain his composure, shifting in his seat and quietly saying something to an aide next to him. But the atmosphere had shifted. What used to be attention on him was now focused on her. She had taken over his space, turning it into a courtroom, and he was now the one on trial. Karoline threw in a brief interruption, letting the tension fill the room. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her bag and pulled out a wrinkled photograph. Holding it up, she pointed it towards the cameras. "This is my husband," she said, "the man your former president found funny enough to mock." The photo showed a young man in military gear standing beside a combat plane, dirt on his face and determination in his eyes. He was rescuing injured soldiers from a war zone. "Mr. Obama, while you were sipping drinks with donors in luxury neighborhoods, he was dodging bombs. And you made a joke out of him because that was easier than facing your own failures." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. One cameraman lost focus. Even the moderator, who was trying to stay neutral, looked visibly shaken. Obama cleared his throat. "Karoline, let's not turn this into a personal attack. That was the wrong move. It became personal the moment you mocked the people keeping this country running," she shot back. "The moment you decided that marriage, military service, and the heartland were just punchlines at your fundraisers." The tension shattered into a thick silence. There was no applause, no criticism, just stunned disbelief. Then came her moment of transition. "But hold on a second. Let's take a step back. Let's talk about heritage for a minute, okay? You used government agencies against those with different views. You turned hope into online labels. And worst of all, you convinced a generation that speaking out was the same as making progress, while silencing any opinions that went against yours." Her tone rose, not out of anger, but authority. "How many working families heard you speak eloquently only to find their insurance costs skyrocket? skyrocketing. How many young people graduated during your time only to end up moving back in with their parents? Do you really think that being articulate without action is somehow better than honest sincerity? Let us know what you think in the comments. Obama sat back in his chair, his jaw set. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. Not through emotion, not through data, not even through factual accuracy. Karoline adjusted the mic slightly. You see, Mr. Obama, I don't care if people label me a supporter, a rookie, or a conservative puppet. The only thing that truly matters to me is the truth. Another mic drop moment. The moderator tried to switch topics, but it didn't matter. No one heard the next question. The room was still under her spell. The moderator's attempt to redirect the discussion fell flat halfway through, overshadowed by the weight of Karoline's words. She wasn't going to wait for anyone's permission to continue. Do you see what I find interesting? She said, her gaze fixed on Obama. That someone who campaigned on unity ended up dividing people even more than before. Obama gave a slight wink, his lips parting as if he was about to speak, but Karoline forged ahead. You talked about hope, but for half the country, that hope felt more like mockery. We got the sense that we were clinging to our beliefs, our families, our values, as if those were things to be ashamed of. The crowd stirred. Reporters in the front row began typing furiously. Viewers at home leaned in closer, and somewhere, probably trending already. The moment spread quickly. Karoline leaned in slightly, without missing a beat. My husband. He didn't join in because he wanted recognition. He did it because he believes in this country. But when you mocked him, you didn't just mock him. You mocked every citizen who cared about something greater than themselves. It felt like the room pulled tighter around them. So let me ask you, what happened to your compassion when the cameras stopped rolling, when the teleprompters turned off, when regular folks needed guidance, not poetry? The smile faded from Obama's face, replaced by a tight line. Karoline's voice softened, but it didn't lose strength. I grew up listening to your speeches. I remember my parents whispering, maybe he'll change. And I remember the silence at the dinner table, when those promises turned into excuses. She paused, letting the memory sink in. You called my husband a joke, but you turned your leadership into a space where applause mattered more than actual results. Her gaze swept across the audience. So let me be clear. I don't care how many awards you won or how many celebrities admire you. The people I represent are tired of being looked down on, labeled, and dismissed. The atmosphere in the venue had shifted. It wasn't shock anymore. It was calm, respect, a sacred silence. Karoline took a breath. Obama let out a small sigh, a nervous laugh that seemed a bit forced. He adjusted his tie and leaned into the mic with that signature grin of his. Look, he started, I really value lively discussions, but what we don't need is another generation getting stuck in nostalgia, mistaking it for national loyalty. The crowd stirred. Some clapped. Others just waited. Karoline's gaze didn't waver. She was analyzing, not reacting. Nostalgia, she said softly. Is that what we call remembering a time when the government actually worked for the people, not the other way around? Obama winked. You say we cling to the past, but let me ask you, what's so great about the future you've sold us? She moved a bit closer. Not too close, but close enough to sense a shift in energy. Skyrocketing prices, rising crime, borders that feel less secure, an education system more focused on ideology than quality. She gestured toward the crowd. Tell me, are they longing for a time when life was affordable and safe, or are they just tired of leaders who think they know better? Obama pressed his lips together. Let's not forget, Karoline, he shot back. I've been elected twice by the people of this country. Your campaign, no matter how loud you are, is still the minority. She didn't flinch. Twice elected, that's true. But did they vote for you or for the hope you promised? A gasp ran through the audience, because somewhere along the line, hope had turned into division. Unity became a joke, and accountability was non-existent. Karoline then strategically stepped back. Obama tried to cut in, but Karoline raised her voice, still calm but firm. Let's not confuse volume with strength. Mr. President, we don't need a celebrity show. We don't have mainstream media outlets, but we do have the truth. And a lot of people are seeing through the smoke and mirrors right now. She looked straight into the camera. They want real leaders, not stars. They want people who still believe in hard work, in family, in values. And then she threw out a piercing question that got to the heart of it all. When did belief become dangerous and dishonesty become the standard in leadership? The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt different, almost free from tension. It was as if a moment of clarity had taken over. Obama paused for a second, adjusting his words, but you could see the focus in his eyes was slipping. He seemed unsettled. Karoline stood her ground, unwavering. The space no longer felt like just a setting. It turned into a battleground of ideas and clashing legacies. The cameras were rolling, capturing everything, yet Karoline's effort felt a bit lacking. She was trying to cleanse the atmosphere. You called my marriage a joke, she said, her voice growing firmer. "You tried to turn something sacred into a political tool." Obama raised an eyebrow. "Just a tiny gesture, but enough to make an impact." "You talk about unity," she continued. "But what truly binds us, if not respect for one another? The sacred, the human experience." She took a deep breath. Now she spoke freely, unburdened by his presence. "When you mock my marriage, it's not just an insult to me. It disrespects every hard-working woman standing beside her partner in sacrifice, crafting something real, while the powerful drink and dismiss each other as out of touch." The silence was deafening. No interruptions, not even from the moderator. Karoline leaned in a bit, fixing her gaze on Obama. "You built a regime on values, but somewhere along the way, you compromised on decency." A slow, intense quiet enveloped the stage. Obama tried to regain control, standing tall, his demeanor calm. "Karoline, with all due respect, no one disrespects values. But when those values divide us," she cut him off, not rudely, but firmly. "No, what divides us isn't about values. It's about those who think their beliefs are the only ones worthy of protection." The lights in the venue dimmed slightly, as if to punctuate the moment. But Karoline wasn't done. She turned to the audience, both in the room and across the country. "Have we really come so far that showing genuine affection is seen as a weakness? That sharing your thoughts makes you a target instead of a citizen?" A few people in the crowd nodded in agreement, while others just sat, absorbing her words. "I'm tired of being labeled a puppet, a symbol, or a spokesperson. I'm a woman who thinks for herself, who speaks out and pushes back when powerful men try to belittle her on stage." Obama didn't laugh it off this time. He listened, maybe for the first time that evening. With the cameras capturing the tension, heritage, and rebellion hung palpably in the air. Karoline had crossed a line that most wouldn't dare to approach, and she showed no signs of regret. The discussion resumed, but it was clear that something had changed. The atmosphere was charged not just by conflict, but by deep thought. There was a weight in the air, not a struggle, but of confrontation. Obama sat back, arms crossed, and his usual charm seemed to dim. Karoline stood tall, composed but not aloof. She didn't seem triumphant. She was present in the moment. "You build a kingdom on your terms, sir," she stated firmly, her gaze steady. "But for so many of us in the smaller communities, working extra hours and caring for families, we don't need poetry. We need precision." Her words didn't shout. They simply cut through the noise. The once vibrant presenter fell silent, sensing that something significant was unfolding right before him. "Do you know what's worse than being ridiculed on national TV?" Karoline asked, locking eyes with Obama again. "It's receiving warnings that your ideas are dangerous. That's what I've been hearing for years. Not from strangers, but from our own leaders." Obama finally spoke, but his tone was softer than usual. "Karoline, I don't believe your ideas are dangerous. I think the way our government has turned is what's hazardous." She replied. "Then maybe you should have spoken up louder when your party sparked the fire." A few gasps echoed in the crowd. "Where were you," she continued, "when the news twisted every word from traditional women into exaggerations? When we were reduced to cliches, mocked for what we believe, and labeled as evil for protecting the unborn?" The crowd shifted, tension easing into contemplation. "I don't want pity," she asserted. "I want fairness." She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "Is that too much to ask, or are we just afraid to see what fairness might look like for those of us who bear the weight of responsibility?" It wasn't just a question for Obama. It resonated for everyone watching. Those who felt silenced, those who had muted their beliefs to fit in, and those who had been told repeatedly that their vision for the nation had no place anymore. "Some of you think I'm just an overzealous advocate," she said. "Some of you see me as inexperienced, but I'll take belief over strategy any day." Then, with a barely perceptible smile, she added, "At least I don't need a teleprompter to say what I mean." A few in the audience stifled laughter, while others clapped, hesitantly at first, but then with more enthusiasm. Obama didn't flinch, but for a moment his gaze dropped. He had nothing to read from and everything to answer for. As the applause gradually faded, Karoline stepped back from the edge, not out of retreat, but strategy. She had made her mark, and now she let it linger. Obama remained silent, his usual calm showing signs of cracks, not from anger, but from reflection. "It's easy to sit in a venue like this," Karoline said, her tone now softer, "and pretend this is just a broadcasted talk. But out there, real families are deciding between heating their homes and buying groceries." She turned toward the cameras. "And you want to talk about style?" The audience murmured quietly this time, not in surprise, but in agreement. For years, traditional views, especially those held by young women like her, had been dismissed as angry, radical, or out of touch. But in this moment, Karoline was none of those things. She was sharp, composed, and undeniably genuine. "They say we oppose oppose women because we believe life starts at conception. They say we oppose science because we ask about limits and needs. They say we oppose progress because we still believe in hard work, marriage, and God. She paused, raising an eyebrow. Tell me, when did rational thought become something to be ridiculed? It was less of a critique and more of a challenge, a statement that resonated with people in living rooms and on screens everywhere. Do you think people are growing tired of political drama? She asked, not to Obama, but to the nation. Because I do. I think they're yearning for authenticity, for leaders who won't flinch when the cameras go off. Obama sighed, clearly understanding now. Karoline went on, you labeled my beliefs as dangerous, Mr. President. But what's truly dangerous? Questioning dominant narratives or blindly following them? A thick silence followed. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. I'm not perfect, but I refuse to pretend. I'm here because I believe this nation deserves resistance, not governance as a brand, but protection as a home. She looked at Obama again, and I don't need your approval to do it. The certainty in her demeanor was unmistakable. No offense, no personal attacks, just conviction. And somehow that struck deeper than anything else that had been said all night. A slow, respectful applause filled the room, with even a few heads nodding, people from both sides. Because whether they agreed with her or not, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt had just owned the moment, and maybe even the future. The stage lights dimmed slightly as Karoline returned to her spot, her presence still commanding the room. She didn't need to say more, but she chose to because there was a final point that needed making. Obama shifted, still composed, but no longer the center of attention. Karoline turned to him one last time. You once said, we are the change we seek. But somewhere along the way, that message got lost, including for people like me. The atmosphere thickened. You inspired a generation to speak out, to dream big. But when those dreams didn't match up with your vision, we became the enemy. The ones you mock, the ones you dismiss. She raised her hand, but we're not going anywhere. In fact, we're growing. There it was, not anger or resentment, just honesty. I believe in a country where dissent isn't silenced, where questioning authority isn't dangerous, but necessary. She stood firm, her voice resolute. You don't have to agree with me, but you will need to confront the reality that we're here now. Vocal, unapologetic, and informed. Obama leaned in slightly, acknowledging her, not necessarily in agreement, but in recognition. This was no longer just a conversation. It was a generational shift, and Karoline had just named it. We have the margin. We are the future, she declared, and we don't ask for permission. The crowd rose to their feet once more, this time not out of surprise or partisanship, but out of movement, a wave not of anger, but of realization. She gave one last look to the audience, then to the cameras. If you're tired of being told who you're allowed to be, if you're done apologizing for thinking differently, maybe it's time to speak out. She smiled, but there was strength in that smile, because I'm far from done talking. The music faded in while the screen gradually went dark, and in that final moment, as many continued to process what they had just witnessed, one question lingered in the air. Was this just a moment of popularity or the beginning of something much bigger? This evening was not just about a debate. It wasn't about right versus wrong or old versus young. It was centered on who holds the future of this nation, and Karoline Leavitt made that clear. She doesn't wait for permission to speak, to lead, or to resist, whether you agree with her or not. One thing is undeniable. She showed up with facts, passion, and a kind of brave conviction that can't be silenced. Barack Obama may have dismissed her marriage, but Karoline dismantled something far greater, the notion that her generation would stay silent. And after this night, no one will ever see her the same way again.